We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Hope everybody enjoyed their seconds, extra helping there last week of AVRant podcast. Although, if you're a regular listener of the HT guys, the HT TV and Home Theater podcast, and or Brightside Home Theater, then you didn't really get extra episodes of their podcasts.
All right, slackers.
You know, but if we're your only feed, then hey, it was double dose of AVRant last week. Thankful on Infinite Podcast. It was very fun, and we got a nice response from people saying they enjoyed it. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody who was celebrating that last week. Yeah,
I actually turned on the video. I just turned it on to see how it went. You know, the very beginning there, and the kids were like glued to the screen for 2+ hours.
Really?
Just watch. Yes, they watched the whole thing.
Wow.
It was weird. I'm like, okay, really? So yeah, they watched the whole thing. They really enjoyed it.
Oh, cool,
so
great.
I was like,
love to hear it.
Okay, so the first full episode of AVRant I have ever since like episode 2 or 3 when I used to go through and cut out all my ums and ahs. Since then, this is the first time. Actually, that's true. There was an AV After Dark episode that I did with the guys where my audio got completely borked.
All right.
Like, I turned into a robot.
I think I remember you mentioning that. You went back through and re-recorded yourself.
I basically re-recorded myself saying the exact same thing in the exact same cadence just a couple of seconds afterwards. Mm-hmm. After I heard myself say it, then I said it, and I just time-shifted everything over. So, that was
technically
fun.
speaking, though, that wasn't AVRant, so this might be the first since back in the
AV
days.
After Dark. Yeah, that was the good old days.
Oh man.
Yeah, so that was very strange, but yeah, it was a fun episode. I had a good time. I haven't talked with Ara and Braden in a long time, and DJ's also always looking for an excuse to hang on our coattails. So that's always fun.
Yes, it was good times.
It's not fair that we outnumber everybody because they're like, next year you guys should invite Liz and Dina. I'm like, first of all, it's not happening, and second of all, that would be 5 to 2 to 1. It seems like we would get an unfair share of them. We were already getting an unfair share of the amount of airtime. So, but it was good. It was a good podcast. Enjoyed it, and good video. The video came out really well, and the little after shot there was good. Rob, you did a good job.
You gotta have a Marvel style stinger. I mean, I don't
That's
know.
right.
Well, DC did it too, so there you go. It all works no matter what naming convention we went with.
Yeah. Am I the only one who gets irritated when I watch a whole movie and I get to the end and I start fast forwarding through the credits looking for the thing? Or even worse, if you actually go to the movies, back when you could, and you sit through the entire credits and go, wait, that was really it? There's not going to be like a Ferris Bueller, come at least walk out and say something thing? Nothing?
Oh, so not the nothing at all, which was the norm for movies, was to not have a scene at the very end of the credits, but there is a little something, but it wasn't really worth sticking around for.
I mean, any of it. I mean, you kind of like, you guys really did nothing? Like, the Star Wars movies are like that, right? They don't have after
I mean, you had the
stuff.
Darth Vader breathing sound at the very end of Phantom Menace? Phantom Menace had the sound of Darth Vader breathing at the very, very end, which was like a little Easter egg nugget if you stuck around to the very end of the credits.
I don't think I've ever stuck around for the end of Phantom Menace. I don't think I've stayed awake.
Oh, people did. Opening night, people definitely stuck around.
I was there. I went to midnight showing. I went to the midnight showing of that movie. So, I did stay awake for all of it. I just didn't stay to the credits. All right, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrant podcast, youtube.com/avrant, and contact us directly, rob@avrant.com. Its Twitter's @FirstReflect. I am Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom. But if you want your question answered, question at avrant.com
yes, please.
Is your friend, because that's how it'll happen.
Email address.
We want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com. I know, it keeps coming up, where you'll see a buy us a cup of coffee link on the right side of the page. They'll take you to a PayPal donation site. I want to thank Dane and Jack for doing that, clicking on that, and that'll take them to their PayPal, and they can either use their PayPal or use their credit card, however they wish to do it, and they did that this week, so we want to thank Dane and Jack.
Yeah, that's awesome to see. Dane, Jack, thank you both very much for the PayPal donations. Really appreciate it.
We also want to thank our 126 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon is a service where you sign up for a monthly subscription to your content creators of choice. And they will take some money from you, however much you tell them to, and give most of it to whomever you tell them to give it to. So if you chose us as one of your patrons to support, or creators to support, and you are one of our patrons, then you would be one of the 126. Jack is one, and he says, we make the week feel a little more normal than it would otherwise. So thank you, Jack, and to our 125 additional patrons.
Yeah, that's patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anyone who would like to sign up. Think of it as a voluntary subscription if you'd like to. So yeah, 126 patrons over there, and Jack, thank you so much for being one of them. Glad we bring a little normalcy to the week. That's a nice thing.
If you can't support us in one of those two ways, and you can find some other way to support us, let us know what you did, and we will mention you on this podcast. So Gurinder sent Amazon gift cards to me and Lee, since he had already sent an Amazon Canada gift card to Rob a little while ago. So thank you for that, first of all. He asked, did I get the Nespresso machine as part of the kitchen right now? And the answer is no. I didn't do it. I talked to my wife about it. Like I said last week, and I actually told her that I talked about this last week, and she argued with me about it. I said, she's not somebody you can just spring things on. You got to warm her up. And she's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, yes, you are. Yes, you are. He says as he talks about, printed panels for the 5th time in the course of 6 months, just gonna ease her into it. So no, I didn't get an espresso machine, though we have talked about it a couple of times. We've got a couple of solutions. So whatever the solution is, it's got to work for both of us. Especially her, since I used to make a pot of French press. I have this big old insulated, metal. Most French presses are glass, and we've broken so many of them. I just got a big old metal one. It's like a thermos almost, with a French press in it. And I used to make one of those, and that would last me 3 or 4 days because I drink a cup, maybe a cup and a half a day. Now I get a cup, and then she's like, "How come you didn't make any more coffee?" I'm like, "Because I only had a cup of coffee." She's like, "Well, it's all gone." Yeah, I wonder how. She's like, "Well, I'm always making the coffee." You're always drinking the coffee. So I mean, you keep telling me you don't like coffee. Like, well, I don't really like it. I'm like, tell the bottom of the pot that. So yeah, we gotta get something else because this is not working. But we're on our way. He also, Grinder again. He also told the person who bought his old Sony projector to start listening to us, and he spotted a shout out to us on Red Flag Deals from an SVS fan. So there you go. Thank you, Gurinder, for mentioning all that.
Yeah, you betcha. Thank you, Gurinder. It's nice that you're noticing support for AVRant and giving support yourself. And still waiting on Lee to check his email and realize he's got an Amazon gift card. Hasn't happened yet.
I think I picked mine up. I think I did.
Pretty darn
I think
sure
I applied
yours
it.
went through.
Yeah, because I happened to see it, and my wife, of course it's Christmas, so I don't. It just went right into there, and it got immediately spent. But I always say, you buy the bike and you earn the spandex. You know what I mean? When you see those people riding around stuff like that, I'm like, well, you gotta earn the spandex. So I've been riding with a friend of mine every week for anywhere from 25 to 40 miles once a week, which is the only time we can never get together, him and I. And I just broke down and bought myself some like a little outfit, one of those little outfits. So now I'm going to be all spandex up.
Man.
But what are you going to do? It's I bought myself a winter jacket.
Yeah.
Thinking, it's a bicycle thing, it's just going to be like a windbreaker or something. I'm like, how did you get this much padding in something so small? So I had to send it back because it's like 3 days a year it ever gets that cold, and it just doesn't ever happen here. So yes, I will. I've spent that on that. That's what we're going to say. Right. We also got some notes of gratitude from some of our listeners for keeping the podcast going during COVID. Mostly we're doing that by not getting COVID.
It is a help.
So that is the number one way we have kept the podcast going, is neither one of us has taken off a mask in public. So we have Jason and David on Facebook, Bertrand, Dane, John, Rob. This is Rob Z, not Rob H. And Rob says, congrats on the new position, Tom, and Thankful and Infinite podcast. It was a lot of fun. Andrew says, thanks for selecting his question for the Mega podcast. He definitely started with a Frankenstein system, B&W 610i front, Axiom center, Yamaha surrounds, Kenwood Pro Logic 2 receiver, passive Sherwin Vega sub, and a 32-inch Sony Trinitron. That was massive back in the day. They only got to like 36, I think, is the biggest it got. He also used to rent a Laserdisc player from a local store. Do we recall our first systems? I don't. Yeah, I do. Greg Karl, and Karl says he really loved the Thanksgiving podcast. He's eager for theaters to reopen when it's safe. As much as he loves his home theater, cinemas and IMAX are still a different experience. And he lives in Austin, Texas, where they hold big events and festivals. I think South by Southwest is there, so I can imagine. So home theaters can't really replace all that. But with everything closed, Thankful and Infinite podcast end up being a highlight. And he's also the only person who thought Rob did a good job of being the MC. Right. Really? No one else thought you did a good job?
Only person who mentioned it. So I'm going to take that as either it was so smooth no one even noticed, it just seemed natural, or maybe it wasn't so great. He's the only one to comment on it.
Fishing for compliments, man. Just send it out there. He's chumming the water for compliments. Don't you guys take the bait. Don't you do it.
Everyone was all like, oh, DJ was so awesome putting it together. Thank you, DJ. Love was such a great idea. Oh, I hope you do this not just next year, but more than once a year. It was so fantastic. Yeah, there was some guy who was like talking over everybody and like, pushing along. Yeah, that's that guy.
Yeah, who was that dude? Sounds very passive-aggressive the whole time. Very passive-aggressive. Nathan enjoyed watching the Thanksgiving podcast and being able to see everyone. Brendan, Joe, Colin from Canberra, Australia. So Canberra, Canberra. I know. I've never really known how to say that. So these are notes of gratitude from Jason, David, Bertrand, Dane, John, Rob, Andrew, Greg, Karl, Nathan, Brendan, Joe, and Colin. So thank you.
Here come the names once again, but from my voice, Jason and David on Facebook, thank you. Bertrand, Dane, John, Rob Z, Andrew. Just to let Andrew know, my first system was a RCA branded home theater in a box and an RCA 20. It wasn't 27. It was whatever the size down from that was, 23, 24-inch television. Yeah, that was my first system. Let's see, where did I get to? Greg, Karl, Nathan, Brendan, Joe, and Colin. Thank you all very much. We really do appreciate the notes of encouragement and gratitude. The Thanksgiving podcast was definitely a hit. So lovely to see. Thank you to everybody who continues to listen to AVRant and send in your questions. Wonderful to keep this podcasting community going.
Yeah, so my first system, I think it was a Panasonic analog, way back in the day, surround receiver, Pro Logic, whatever.
Sure.
It had, I had 2 Panasonic speakers up front and 2 no-name speakers in back, one with a torn surround on it. So it buzzed and I kept having to put duct tape on it. I didn't have a center channel for a long time and ended up getting an outdoor Bose speaker from a coworker who sold it to me for $50 or something like that. I don't know. I was way overpriced. But I had 5 speakers. I did not have a sub until I got my first real theater. I did buy a KLH, woofer box thing much after this. That was complete and total garbage. It was total garbage. But I don't know if that's why I don't classify it as a sub. Later on, I did upgrade some of the speakers. I think what happened was a girlfriend of mine bought me some Bose 301s. You know, the ones that fire, that tweeters fire from the side, and they're kind of square. I put those up front, put the Panasonics in the back, and got rid of the other two because they were garbage. But the real sub didn't come until I got my Axiom system right before I started working for Audio.
EP500, we remember you fondly.
That's right. So there's all the scars on my shins from getting too close to the dang thing. It's sharp corners. Like,
you can see the logic here, folks. You can see where the opinions on center speakers, surround backs, and cylinder subs all came from. It's all from experience.
Yep. All right, in the news, this comes from Theo. He says the Dolby Surround Up Mixer really is supposed to be getting support for front wide speakers, ... at some point, ... All the way back in August, Shane from Spare Change interviewed John from Trinov, and John mentioned that front wide support would be coming to the next version of the Dolby Surround Up Mixer. What? How is this dog in here?
That I can't answer.
All right.
I also have...
Okay.
Yep. I'll vamp.
Go on. Read the next... I gotta
okay. I also have no idea when this new version of Dolby Surround Up Mixer is coming. But, so we've got the pieces being put together. John from Trinov would certainly know about such things. Trinov is almost always the very first to implement new surround codecs, new audio codecs in their altitude processors. So, I missed that little tidbit in that interview that Spare Change did on YouTube and on his podcast. I mean, it was about an hour and a half long. Who would ever listen to something so long as that? I said, without a touch of irony. That was mentioned back then, and then Audioholics has mentioned that the firmware update that should have actually already dropped for their X8500H receiver from Denon and the AV8805 Pre-Pro from Marantz, that was supposed to add DTS X Pro and this new Dolby Surround upmixing to surround wides, or front wides. So there you go. Somebody, hopefully, who has one of those top-end Denon or Marantzes might be able to confirm that for us. Tom is sitting back down, but there you go. You can mention the Polk and Def Tech thing because you're back.
Yeah. Yeah, so the dog was supposed to be in the room with one of my kids because I'm doing the podcast, but I didn't tell him I was doing the podcast, even though he should know I was doing the podcast, so he let her out, and somehow she pushed her way into this room, which I think she can operate door handles now? Are you becoming self-aware?
Can. Do you have the lever type of handle, or do you have a knob?
I do. I just installed the levers.
Yeah, dogs can definitely sometimes get at the lever type of handles.
She's a very small dog. She's 21 pounds. She's an itty-bitty thing. She can't get up there. She totally could. All right, Polk and Def Tech have their first IMAX enhanced speakers. That's just... I cannot express to you how thrilled I am by that. It's very hard to express that in words. It is a thing. So only the flagship Polk Legend and Def Tech Demand series carry the IMAX Enhanced certification. What does IMAX Enhanced certification for speakers and subwoofers entail? Nobody can say. Sure, it involves somebody paying IMAX some money for a sticker to stick on the side of their speaker or on the box. I'm pretty sure that's what it entails. Only licensees may see the requirements, and they aren't allowed to tell. So for those of you that aren't aware or have forgotten blissfully, THX certification for speakers used to be a thing that some manufacturers would go after, and what it basically meant is that some still do. That's right. Doesn't Klipsch still have THX certified speakers? I feel like
they do. They still have THX Ultra certified. They haven't changed them in over a decade, I think, at this point.
Yeah, but why would you, right? So what it just basically means is that they play reasonably flat and they hit certain benchmarks, meaning that the speaker can get down to wherever the subwoofer should be crossed over, which in THX certification, it's 80 hertz. You got to be able to go down low enough so that it goes past that 80 hertz mark so that the crossover, it does all the stuff it's supposed to do.
And in their case, with a 12 dB roll-off on that bottom end, they specify the order of roll-off on the bottom. They also specify, this is THX we're talking about, not IMAX yet, dispersion. You have to have somewhat limited vertical dispersion, but wide horizontal dispersion. That was a THX thing. But IMAX, we don't know.
So we gotta assume that IMAX is going to be something very... I mean, what else are they going to do?
It appears that loud is a requirement. That
doesn't surprise me.
Seems to... They mention output capability.
THX does that too, but that's the ultra part of it, right? THX, like they'll say select or ultra, and that tells you how loud they can get because of how the bigger the room is. So, maybe IMAX is just... It has to be loud, no matter what. Always has to be loud. Like, don't just look forward to Sirwin Vega coming out with.
Seemed to be about the only thing that was consistently mentioned was dynamic ability and sheer output capability.
Right. Which means that Klipsch certainly could go for this. I mean, Klipsch is well positioned to hit all those benchmarks without having to change a dang thing. And that's what's really irritating about to me personally, rubs me the wrong way, is that you can get the certification on many speakers that are currently on the market, but it just literally makes the speaker cost more. They have to make no changes to the speaker as it's built, but they can hit those benchmarks easily, and therefore the only thing it does for you is let you know that they can hit the benchmarks, or you can read a review that takes measurements.
Still can't confirm if it would, because we don't know what the requirements actually are.
Right. All right, some comments here, or a comment here. Bob in the Philippines has heard our recent jabs, I don't know, about center speakers being the least important speaker in a surround sound setup. That is true. But in his case, he unfortunately has tinnitus, and the only way he can hear dialogue clearly over the background music and sound effects is if he's able to turn up the trim level for the center and down the trim level for all other speakers. For him, his SVS Ultra Center is critical, so he doesn't think that should be overlooked. Well, I mean, like I said, I mean, overall, I still stand by what I said, but in your case, I can see where you're coming from. It's a use case scenario. There's a smaller section of the population that runs into this, and there's people who sit off center, and there's people whose speakers are, their couches are against the wall, and the thing is in the middle of the room, and the center channel is imperative for locking the dialogue in where it feels like it's coming from the TV instead of from one of the side speakers. I understand all that. But again, it's the only speaker you can take out of your system, and your receiver goes, "Oh, that's fine. Don't worry. We'll take care of this."
All the sound remains in the location where it should be. Yes, no, we have been consistent in saying that if you do have a center speaker, an actual speaker that is there playing the center channel, that it needs to be a good one that timbre matches your front, left, and right speakers. So we have been consistent in saying that all along, and there you go. When you have a center speaker, it should be a good one.
And the SVS Ultra series is a good one. I'm sitting right in front of it. Well, there's one right behind me right now, and it's a very good center speaker. All right, on to the questions here. Chris. So 3 years ago, Chris temporarily put up one layer of drywall and temporarily installed his speakers and projector just to double check their placement. Yeah. So this is 100% me. As I look around my theater and all the things I started to fix and never finished fixing. Yeah. 3 years later, he has finally taken down that temporary drywall layer and completely finished his theater room. It's got double drywall now, and the exact finished dimensions are 18 feet 10 inches long by 12 feet 3 inches wide, and exactly 7 feet high. Must be a basement. And he wants to complete the finishing touches. The floor is fully carpeted, medium pile over a thick pad. He's making DIY absorption panels, 3 2-foot by 3-foot panels on each side wall. Okay. He has 2 rows of seats. The back row is on an 8-inch riser. There's room behind the back row for a sub. So what size and thickness should the absorption panels on his back wall be? There aren't really any restrictions, of course, within reason. I mean, I would put... I don't really... The 3-inch thick panels would be fine. I mean, it depends on if you got air gaps and stuff like that to consider. But I would just do a 2-foot by 4-inch thick, and throw those back there and call it a day. Sure. You could even put them horizontal, so that they just have a nice little line across the whole back wall. Right. Depending on if you have surround back speakers back there, how you have to orient around those. I mean, on my back wall, I've got 2-foot by 2-foot by about 1.5 inches, maybe 2-inch thick panels that are on. I mean, they're not technically directly on the wall, just because they kind of hang weird, but they're just back there wherever I can fit them. There's a shelf, so I have to kind of negotiate around that, and I have 2, and it's kind of off to the side, and I've got them on the side walls and stuff. So yeah. As far as horizontal spread, I would have it cover the entire width of your seating, because said there's not really any restrictions, so I would have it cover the entire width of your seating. Thickness, I mean, I would just basically look at GIX 244
panel, which is 4 inches
Right.
of insulation plus a little bit of an air gap. So it's actually closer to 5.5 inches deep as far as the frame itself goes, because it's about an inch and a half air gap behind 4 inches of insulation. If you don't have the restrictions and you're making it yourself and it can be affordable, that's roughly what I would go for on that back wall.
Okay. He'll be using My Fabric Designs to get prints on fabric to cover the panels. What material should he request? Well, I mean, there's the expensive stuff.
Right.
What is it called?
I don't know. I don't know which one you're thinking of.
I'm thinking the one everybody uses. It that has all the different colors and stuff like that. But really, you just need. I mean, if you really wanted to be safe, burlap is like super safe. Anything that's breathable cotton, that sort of thing would be fine.
Yeah, they have some cotton ones. As far as I'm just borrowing from what people have said on forums, specifically from My Fabric Designs with the names that they've given their fabrics. They have one called a Silky Fail. Faille is the Silky Fail. It is not the most expensive, but it's definitely not the cheapest one that they offer. But in terms of both being acoustically transparent, which you want, but retaining very good print quality, because that is a consideration here. If you're going to pay the money to have a printed image on the fabric, then you want the print quality to look as good as possible. So according to people on the forums, out of the fabrics they offer, the Silky Fail is the nice sort of compromise in all areas, the best choice for a good print quality, reasonable price, and still acoustically transparent.
Right. Gulford of Maine was the one I was thinking of.
Brand,
That's just the brand of super expensive. It may not, but that's the one that if you go to GIK or any of these other places, the upgraded fabric options are those, and the colors are a lot more accurate and consistent. So that's the one they usually use. So he planned for floor-to-ceiling corner bass traps. What are the pros and cons of straddling panels versus making super chunks? The pros and cons. So the straddling panel, if you make the straddling panel the way that most people make it, which is to buy one and just stand in the corner, is that it is a square thing trying to go into a triangular shape, and it doesn't really fit correctly, so it just straddles the corner. If you are making it yourself, you can make it so that it's not doing that it sits
you
flush.
You can bevel the edges. Yep.
Right. So the real benefit here is for you is going to be cost. It's easier, just physically easier, to take and fill up that entire corner with insulation. You take your 2 foot by 4 foot by 4 inch thick insulation board, and you cut it in half
to make squares first.
To make 2 by 2 squares, and then you cut it diagonally to make triangles that have 2 foot on 2 foot by whatever the cross section is. I don't
2
know.
foot
A
squared
squared plus B squared equals C squared.
That's right.
I don't know. I ain't doing that math in my head right now.
That was a bit much.
So then you stack those all up floor to ceiling, and then you build a little frame around it that you can put the fabric on, and then you tack it in place, and Bob's your uncle. But that's a lot of insulation. If you can take and build a panel that's a little bit further out, then what you've got is like a 4 or 6 inch panel. That goes floor to ceiling, that you can make so that I'm using my hands. I'm talking a lot with my hands right now, but that has an angle to it so that it still looks like it's sitting flush. And then there's an air gap behind it. The effectiveness of that panel is going to be similar to having those triangles up in there because of the air gap and how all of that works. So you can theoretically save money by using less insulation to get the same amount of bass trapping.
Yeah. But if you bevel them, you'll have waste material.
Yes.
And, it'll be more and a slightly more complicated cuts. So, yeah, the benefit of the super...
So we don't know how handy you are, really. I guess that's the real question.
The benefit of the super chunk is that it's very simple cuts, no waste material, and you do, like if you're talking about 2 foot by 4 foot panels that you're starting with, you end up with a face on that thing that's straddling the corner. With the super chunk, that is a little bit larger because we're talking the hypotenuse of 2 foot sides instead of it being a 2 foot side that is facing when you do the straddling. So yeah, those are the benefits. But yeah, I think you'll still end up buying more to make the super chunks. But the time involved is probably less, and it ends up larger.
Right. So, right. So if you just take the 2 foot by 4 foot panel and put it in there, then what Rob's saying is, you're just getting 2. So whatever the square root of 8 is,
which is larger than 2.
The hypotenuse, which is larger than 2. Effectiveness though might be around the same. Or
not a huge difference.
We don't know. It's not going to be a massive difference between the two. So this would make it, if you did the super chunks, it would make it more. It would be less. So it would look cleaner, and I think it wouldn't come out as far into the room as taking the 2 foot by 4 foot by 4 inch thick panel and just putting it there.
Sure.
So there may be an aesthetic component to this that you would want to factor in. If it were me, in my home theater, I'm going super chunk all the way just because of the ease and space saving. But that's just me. He says, since the ceiling is a bit low, the back row riser is only 8 inches. He was thinking of going with HT Market home theater recliners, 3 in the front, 3 or 4 in the back, but his wife prefers to sit in the back row, and he's concerned the seat backs of the front row might block her visibility and the sound from the center speaker, which is below his 120-inch screen. They were using 2 couches in the temporary setup, but the backs are lower than the theater recliners. Any advice? If you sit in the back row, you get what you get. You don't throw a fit. That's what I would say. My home theater, you want to sit back there? That's on you. I'm sorry that you have made this poor life decision, but you have. There are home theater recliners, and I don't know HT Market's offerings at the top of my head. There are those that are slightly shorter, but almost all of them take into account the fact that you're going to want to recline.
Yeah.
And there's a headrest back there, fairly high one, depending on height and stuff like that. I guess my thought would be, if she's sitting in the back row and you're sitting in the front row, you leave your riser the way it is because it has to be that way. And then when she's back there, you recline every seat that's in front of her, even if there's nobody in it, in order to give her better sight lines and ability to hear the center channel more clearly. That would be my solution, and it costs literally nothing.
Yeah. Typically with the seat back heights that HT Market has, you would want a 12-inch riser. So 8 inches, she probably will. There'll be if the seats are upright and you're sitting in the back row on an 8-inch riser, you probably will have a little strip along the bottom that is slightly obscured by the seat backs. Probably wouldn't have a completely clear line of sight to the center speaker if it's below the screen. So solution 1, just keep a lower back seat in the front row and only have recliners in the back row. Solution number 2, recline the seats every time, as Tom just said. There's nobody sitting in it, but you recline the seat, and now it's clear sight lines and clear line of sight for the center speaker. Solution number 3, I guess, would be to make a taller riser in the back, but then head clearance might be an issue when it's only a 7-foot ceiling. So one of those will be the solution.
So with a $3,000 budget, is there any better projector option than the Epson 5050 UB? What would be the next worthwhile step up in price and performance? That's going to be a JVC, and it's going to cost a bit more.
Yeah, there could be an argument made for the $5,000 Sony. That one does not have frame-by-frame tone mapping. The $5,000 Sony, the VW295, you have to go up to their $10,000 model in Sony's lineup before you get the frame-by-frame, whereas the $6,000 JVC has frame-by-frame tone mapping. But those are the next step up. There's as long as it fits your parameters for where you can mount it and your screen size, which in your case it does, there's nothing better than the 5050 UB from Epson at that lower price point.
So he likes 3D on the projector.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let that sit out there for a while. Everybody can just absorb it. Anyways, so what are the 3D glasses options for Epson if he wants to have a bunch of extras on hand for future guests one day, when we can have guests again? Now, we talked about this on the podcast not too long ago, and I ended up kind of going down the rabbit hole and looking at a bunch of different options out there. There are some fairly inexpensive options for Epson projectors, but you really need to pay attention to the reviews of them, because there's quite a few of them that you're like, I can get this for almost nothing, and they're like, yeah, the arms break off if you look at them weird. So
those would be the Syntron ones, which are your least expensive option. There are Syntron branded 3D glasses that work with Epson. They're like $15 a pair, I think.
Yeah, something like that. They're really cheap.
Come in a 2 or a 4-pack or something like that, but it is fixed, spindly little arms that go past your ears there, the stems, and apparently they break very easily, but it is inexpensive. If you don't mind, those are what you hand out to guests. That's the cheapest option. There is Ilicliv. I don't know how to pronounce that.
That's what it looks like.
Ilicliv, the KX60s, they would be the next least expensive option, but apparently aren't very comfortable.
That's right. Some of these Chinese import companies just throw, alphabet
they
pieces
found a
up in the
name
air
that
and say, "This is where we
doesn't
go."
come up in a trademark. They're apparently not very comfortable because they stupidly they're rechargeable batteries in it, which is nice, but they put the charging port on the bridge of the nose. That's where the USB plug-in goes. I'm like, why?
I looked at
all
that one too.
you put it on the top of the bridge and you don't have this issue. You put it on the bottom and now it digs into everybody's nose when they wear it. So, do you want to go to the $50 or $60 per pair Samsung glasses? Because Samsung's glasses work. The 5100 glasses from Samsung, they work, but they're like $50 or $60 a pop. So, yeah, either something that's not very comfortable in the Ilicliv, something that will likely break on you, but is very cheap in the Syntrons, or $50 or $60 for Samsung's glasses.
Yeah. Right. And those were the three that I looked at as well. And I bought none of them for obvious reasons. But there's not a whole lot of reason for me to get 3D in here. They only have a couple of things that are even capable of being 3D. So
I'm thinking in his case, there should be 2 pairs that come with the 5050 UB, because I'm pretty sure it still comes with Epson branded glasses.
Does it really?
I think so. I might be wrong about that. I would probably get Samsung's for basically I want 3 good pairs of glasses, I think is fair, because that's you and your wife and one other person maybe. So maybe you if it does come with 2 pairs of Epson's own glasses in the package, then maybe get 1 pair of the Samsungs to have on hand. That way you've got 3 good ones, and then I'd probably just get some Syntrons, and if they break, they break. Oh well, tape them up.
Right. So recommendations for paint color, function versus fashion. So my home theater is currently orange. Because that's the color these walls were when I bought this room, and I have not changed it. But when we did all the painting in the rest of the house, I told my wife I wanted to paint the home theater gray, and she's like, "Yes, let's definitely do that." And of course, I haven't done it because I now have a job again, and I have to do work. Plus, it's going to take a while to prep this room and get everything away from the wall and all the other stuff. So I'm really kind of holding off on it for right now. But we've talked a lot about this. I mean, Rob's going to give you the exact color that's the best color to get. I think, for me, I'm going to be looking at the gray. I'm going to be painting some swatches up on my wall and taking a look at them. I want to go a darker gray, but I'm not going to go probably as dark as people would want. I'm definitely not going black, but I would go for sort of like a medium dark gray that would allow, it to look better when it's dark in here, but not so dark that when you walk in, you're like, what? I already have a gray couch, so we've got that going on as well. I don't want it to be too gray, so I might go with even a lighter gray in here, just because I think that would work aesthetically. But I think any sort of gray, no matter what color it is probably going to be the way you would want to go.
I think that's gray is what you want as far as performance goes. It's not going to skew your eye. It's not going to bias your eye in any way as far as colors go. And then gray still remains fashionable. So I think it checks both boxes.
Right. It does right now. Gray is super, as somebody who sold a house in the last couple of years, that when we sold the house that I owned in Jacksonville, we talked with the real estate. They're like, gray. Yeah. You want light gray walls, gray flooring, everything gray. All the tile gray, everything gray, everything gray. I was like, really? Yeah. And that house sold in a day. So gray is definitely hot right now.
So performance-wise, with a projector, the darker you can go, the better. Definitely don't go glossy, no matter what. Try to keep, something closer to flat. I went with what they call a velvet finish, which turned out very, very nice. And Sherwin-Williams, if you want something that has been measured to be exceedingly color neutral, Sherwin-Williams, if you go anything in their 707 series, if you look up the name Gray Screen, that will get you to the 707 series, and then there's just darker and darker shades from there.
All right. That sounds good. He is pre-wired for 6 Atmos speakers. He has a Denon X4300H. He'd be down to try the 3 receivers approach in order to create matrix top middles. Could we give a step-by-step for how to do that? And he knows there's a processing aspect that involves keeping the Odyssey EQ flat for certain outputs. Could we clarify that a bit? So if you think of your Atmos speakers, your top fronts and top rears as being front left and front right speakers, then you matrix out the middle by using a phantom center.
Well, not a phantom anymore.
Well, it's not a phantom; it'd be real, right?
Center.
So, a matrix center. So, what you would do is plug the surround. I'm sorry, the front,
top front
the
left,
top front right, and the top rear right into, left or right, for your main speakers in your second receiver, and then have it matrix out the center channel from that, and then do the same thing on the other side with a second receiver. Is physically how it works. You're gonna have to sync those receivers dials to 0 or whatever in order to make sure that you're not getting any attenuation, and reset everything so there's no Odyssey or anything going on the receivers on those 2 separate receiver sides. Maybe put it in pure direct or something along those lines, just to make sure there's no base management or anything trying to happen there. But that's physically how it works.
Yeah, so you have extra receiver number 1 is your left-hand side Atmos speakers. Extra receiver number 2 is your right-hand side Atmos speakers. And yes, you're using the center is being matrixed out to create the top middle. The part that you have to be careful with, and thankfully on an X4300H you can do this with the Odyssey Editor app, you do need to make sure that the distances and levels for the top front left and the top rear left are identical so that you get a properly matrix center, and you want to make sure they do not have their own EQ applied, right? So if you just run Odyssey, it might set different distances and levels and independent EQ for your top front left speaker versus your top rear left speaker, let's say. If it does that, you won't properly matrix the center channel in that receiver, creating the top middle. So those things all need to be identical. So basically what you do is deactivate the equalization in the Odyssey Editor app for your top speakers, don't have EQ applied to them, and make sure that the distances and levels are set identically, and that way you'll get a properly matrixed center channel in that receiver to create the top middle.
Okay. So I already said that. All right. So on to Nathan. Nathan has a friend who is moving to Greece. This friend and his wife insist that they only ever watch movies and TV at night. We should assume the room won't have full light control, though, and that it'll have white walls. They don't want a big flat panel or any visible speakers. The place in Greece isn't even going to be built until next year, but the living room that they've laid out will have a big picture windows, and their idea is to have a motorized screen that can roll down in front of those windows at night. The picture windows take up pretty much that entire wall, so there isn't anywhere to install in-wall or on-wall speakers. They want a simple speaker system with the speakers in the ceiling anyway. Why are you asking us?
Trying to convince them otherwise.
Right. Nathan instructed them not to buy anything until the place is built, but he gave them some examples of products that they could look for and just wants to double check with us if we think he's leading them down the right path. Their budget, if it was in US dollars, is about $3,000 for everything: screen, projector, and speakers.
Yeah.
Unless Greece is like super inexpensive for projectors, then you're I don't think that you're being very reasonable here. It would be my first reaction. Yeah. So yeah, he says Elite Screen's Spectrum tab tensioned. That's for the screen. It keeps the price down under $700, but provides tensioning. Just a white material, though. Would we recommend something else? Well, I wouldn't have started with the screen to start with. We got to figure out everything else first, but yeah. So the question becomes, if you want, I don't think you have another option unless there's a cheaper tab tensioned option out there, because you can't really look into ambient light rejecting, because it's just gonna be way too expensive. It's gonna suck up your whole budget. I mean, a fixed on-wall screen that's ambient light rejecting of any kind is going to start around $500, and then when you add a motorized and everything else to it, it's going to be well into the thousands. So yeah, I guess is fine unless it's a cheaper option.
So I might strongly consider going something with ambient light rejecting. And Tom, I don't know if you're hearing me because your bandwidth has completely disappeared on me. So yeah, Elite Screens does have options for tab tension with ambient light rejecting. You'd want to be looking at like their Cine Gray material, but yeah, it will be getting you up to about $1,200 or something like that. So yeah, that's where I'd look there potentially, but that's going to eat up a lot of your budget. And once you get the projector that we're going to talk about, that's pretty much all of the $3,000. There's nothing left over for speakers. But honestly, I mean, white walls, no light control. Yes, it's going to be at night and dark, but you're going to get reflections back on that screen. It's kind of worth it. It's kind of worth it to have the ambient light rejecting. The Cine Gray is a decent way to go in here from Elite Screens, but expect to pay about $1,200.
See, so an Epson 3700 projector for their budget 4K doesn't seem likely, or anything ultra black. What do we think? I mean, Rob's going to have a specific opinion, but yeah, this is going to be. You're now looking with $3,000 to spend. It's far too little to do everything you want to do in here.
Well, nicely, you can get an image, you can get speakers, but
all right, you can get a projector and speakers and have and a screen and have money to spare. It'll just be garbage, and more garbage. So if you want to get something good, or even okay, you're going to be sucking up. This budget is not really reasonable, I don't think. But, whatever. I mean, a lot of people spend $3,000 just on a display. That's not unusual to go in there and look at these OLEDs and go, ooh, yeah, okay, $2,700. All right, that's fine. Now, for $3,000 for a projector, a screen, and speakers seems a bit excessive, but go on. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you're looking in the right ballpark there. The Epson 3700 or 3800. I think there's a 3600 as well, but one of those is what you're going to want to get. At least you still get some lens shift. You get pretty decent performance. You don't get the blackest blacks, but that's not going to be concerned in here anyway. So yeah, you're in the right ballpark. You're going to be at the $1,500 or dollar under mark, but if you combine that with a $1,200 screen, there's not much money left over for AV receiver and speakers, but maybe that's the case.
Okay. So he suggested KEF in ceilings. Would we point them to something else? Yeah, I would.
Anything?
But I mean, yeah, anything that's not. I mean, are they going to have no furniture between them and the screen? It's just going to be chairs pointed at a wall of windows and nothing up there, right?
I don't know.
There's not going to be anything up there. They're telling me there's not going to be anything up there, because that seems unreasonable.
I think that's what they want. They want these picture windows. It looks like there's nothing there except for the picture windows, but then a screen rolls down. So I think that's exactly what they're going after.
They're going to have a potted plant or a bookshelf or something. I think maybe I'm wrong. But if you have to go in ceiling, I'm sure there's lots of options out there. This is where, unfortunately, you're going to have to try to save the most money you can, because nothing's really going to make it sound great, especially if this is a massive room, which it sounds like it might be. I'd go for anything horn loaded if you could. And
maybe. I mean, if this is going to end up what you're talking about, that hell or high water, you're going to end up with in-ceiling speakers. Golden Ear is probably one of your best options. They do have their angled ones. They're, HTC 7000, or I might have the letters wrong, but they're angled in-ceiling speakers with their folded ribbon tweeters. That's about as good as it gets for an in-ceiling speaker acting as front speakers. So I would look there. But you're going to be looking at $600 or $700 just for a pair up front. So we're going to start blowing your budget, but that would be where I would point them, Golden Ear.
Right, but that's, and again, this is one of those times where why would we even bother with a center channel? I don't see any reason of going 5.1 or anything. I just go straight stereo, and because I don't think they're going to care. And we're not even talking about subwoofers, right? There's no talk of subwoofers. They don't want to put any speakers in the room, so I don't see them installing an in-ceiling sub, which will blow this budget anyways, just by itself. Could be blowing the budget. So Yeah, I would just go stereo. So he suggested an entry-level 5.1 Yamaha AV receiver, but also mentioned Denon and Marantz. Our thoughts? What is on sale? Because it literally does not matter at this point.
I mean, I'm sure a Marantz Slimline would go well form factor-wise, but Yamaha has a slim AV receiver model now too. Whatever's cheapest. 5.1 is going to be enough. That's it.
So, Rob, what are our thoughts on how to fix this without doing what they want?
I mean, if that's what they've got in mind, I mean, it's their house. It's not on you to make this good, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. If it is true that they're going to have some sort of piece of furniture up there, I would highly suggest that they look into like a sound bar or a like one of those Yamaha sound projectors. Again, that's not going to be great for the budget, but it would be a lot easier to put everything up there. Then you don't need the receiver if you get the Yamaha sound bar thingy. You can plug it does all the processing right there. You can plug everything into it right there. Depending on how many sources they're going to have, I suppose, we have to worry about that as well. Because we haven't even talked about that. What are they using for? I mean, right now they've got a projector, a screen, maybe a receiver, and a couple of speakers that are all put them all together, and it's more than $3,000 anyways. Yeah. And then they still have nothing to watch on it.
No, I mean those are the components they said with this budget. So
yeah,
there you go. That's as good as we can get you.
If there's also a piece of furniture up front, what about that OLED that rolls up? How much does that thing cost? Get one of those.
It ended up way more than we thought. What is it? Isn't it like $80,000? And it's only 65 inches. So
wow. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. Galen's theater area is 16 feet long, 24 feet wide, 9 feet high. It's open on the right side to his kitchen. He's using quite old Celestron speakers, and he'd like to upgrade. He'll be keeping his Pioneer Elite LX 302 receiver and B&W 610 sub. He's got about 3 feet of space from the back wall to the back of his seats, which are a pair of recliners, and about 11 feet to his front speakers. The ceiling is already pre-wired for a pair of speakers, but the exact speaker locations have not been cut. Since the receiver can do 1.2, he'd like to give Atmos a try. What speakers would we recommend to replace his 5 Celestron speakers? I mean, there's a budget associated with this, or we're just like, get anything? I mean, because that makes a big difference here. I don't know anything about Celestron speakers.
Yeah, I don't know what the budget is here, unfortunately. So, but I mean, it's going to be usual suspects, right? You can point you to. I mean, first of all, try the ones that have a completely free return policy, free shipping 2 ways. So SVS and AVRant. Yeah. Give them a try, because you know what, you're probably going to be highly satisfied with one of those two options right off the bat. And SVS, I'm assuming if the Ultra series is too expensive, the Prime series is quite affordable. If that's more expensive than you're looking to go for, like SVS Prime series, then we have to start looking at, I don't know, maybe something like ELAC would be a good option there. But, if Prime or Ultra series is affordable to you, then either the Novus or the, what is it, Aperion? Varus. There you go. Varus Grand. Yeah. Those will be in that price range too. So I'd start there, because it's no risk, and one of those is probably going to float your boat.
Right. Those are both very flat speakers that you should be very happy with. If you are really wanting to have a larger, I mean, we've talked about so many different speaker brands, so many times, CAF and, obviously Ascend Acoustics and, so many others. You could go out and do some listening. RBH would be great too. You could go out and do some listening, but that requires you to go out and, be in stores, which some people find exceedingly stressful. So if you just ordered these two and picked one of them, you would end up in a good place. You should be happy, and we would think that you had made a good choice. So I think that would be a good place to start. And if you're like, well, I've heard these and I like them, but I'm not like super in love with them, and here's why, then we can point you towards something maybe that's better, or not better, but more to your liking. He asks, where should the in-ceiling speakers be located? How far apart? And what size should the in-ceiling speakers be? So if you're going to do 5.1.2, the 2 should be top middles. I mean, pretty much everybody agrees that they go right over the top of you to the sides of your couches in line with your, well, theoretically in line with your main speakers, but if your main speakers are closer together than the edges of your couch, I would at least put them to the arms of your couch, right above your head when you recline.
Yeah, just to the outsides of your couch. Dolby's own specific guidelines now are anywhere from half the width of your room to 3/4 of the width of your room. So that can be a pretty wide range.
Yeah.
But somewhere in there is totally acceptable under the guidelines. If you only got 2, then they should go basically straight overhead. I'd go for 6.5-inch speakers. For in-ceiling speakers, I'd go 6.5-inch. However, I could make an argument, if you're trying to keep the price down, of heading over to mono price. And since the only backer box is that they have back cans that they have are for their 8-inch models, then I could make the argument there because that keeps the price down. You get actual back cans that keep all your fire safety code and give you a back enclosure, all for a very reasonable price. The Alpha series over at Monoprice in the 8-inch size, I could definitely advocate for.
Lastly, he asked, what's the rule of thumb for how far off the ground front and rear speakers should be placed? Well, front speakers should be placed, well, not your center, but your front, left, and right speakers should be placed so that the tweeter is at ear height when you're, whatever your ear height is when you are sitting down or reclining or whatever. So there's stands that are specifically built at different, like, sort of standard heights, and you just pick the one that measures about right for your where the tweeter is. The center speaker obviously is usually compromised as far as that can't go as high as you want it to go. So you tilt it or aim it, or the off-axis response is such that it does the job without you having to do those things. Your rear speaker should be so that the tweeter has a line of sight to your ears
at all seats
when you are at all the different seats.
Yes.
And that's the same for I mean, when you say rear, we mean surrounds, and surrounds are to the sides and not to the back. I'm feeling yours are behind you, which is fine. But if they were to the sides, the way they should be, the up down, the up of them should be high enough so that the person in the far seat still has a direct line of sight from their ear to the speaker that's across the room.
So typically your surrounds and surround backs will be elevated a little bit, maybe 4.5, 5 feet instead of 3 to 3.5 feet. But yeah, get the tweeters at ear level across the front as close as you can. Center might be higher or lower, so just tilt it as necessary. And then the surrounds, elevate them a bit so that if someone's head is right beside it, it's not going to be blocking it from the person sitting next to them.
Right. All right, Jairus. We previously gave him some advice for his open living space that totals about 5,000 cubic feet. He looked up Gix panels with his wife, and she's on board with their Impression series panels that offer cool-looking diffusion patterns on top of absorption panels, as well as their custom art panels. So it might not be absolute perfection, but at least he can improve the acoustics. We also convinced him to go with all in walls, although he'll still have in walls. Oh, I'm sorry, not go with all. You should have bolded that. Not go with all in walls, although he'll still have in walls for the surrounds, in ceilings for Atmos. Based on some of our suggestions, he priced out some options like this to weigh in. So the HSU HC1 Mark II speakers up front with HIW1 for surround and Atmos versus Klipsch Reference Premiere towers, center surrounds, and in-ceiling Atmos speakers. What are our thoughts on that? So these are both horn-loaded options. That's right?
They both
They're
are.
both horn-loaded
Correct.
options. And I would guess that the price difference is that the Klipsch are more expensive. Is that true?
Yeah, they should be pricing it out. Particularly the in-ceiling speakers are quite a bit more expensive. And they aren't even horn-loaded, the Klipsch in-ceilings.
Yeah. I would be leaning towards the HSU if you're going to go horn-loaded, and it's simply because I don't think the performance difference is going to be worth the price difference in this case. Now, there is an aesthetic difference that is something that can be considered, but since most of your stuff is going in the ceiling and the wall anyways, if you really cared that much about the aesthetics for the 3 front speakers, you could go Klipsch for the 3 front speakers and then HSU for everything else.
Definitely could.
But while you're going HSU, you might as well just stick with HSU all the way around, and then you still save a little bit more money. So that's sort of where I would go.
Yeah, I'm guessing.
But I will enable you to buy Klipsch. Not enable, but approve of you buying Klipsch for the front three and tell you that the rest of them will sound just fine with Klipsch.
Yeah, I'm guessing that he might have it in mind that if he's not going to have in-walls up front, that he would prefer towers just as a look. If that's the case, having Klipsch towers and a Klipsch center as your front three, but then the HSU in-walls for all the other positions, that will blend perfectly fine and probably save you money. So I'm betting that's the solution he ends up leaning toward.
Right. Okay, I'm just throwing something in Google here because I don't know what subwoofer this is. So he says dual power sound audio V18 iPal subs. I think it's iPal. That's an I, right? Yep. Versus dual SVS PB3000. So I'm looking up the iPal.
So,
right
I mean, they're the power sound audios. If you just want sheer output and extension, that they will outdo the SVS PB3000s without the price delta being absolutely massive, because that is where power sound audio comes in. But for goodness sake, make sure you are fully aware of the actual size of these things.
That is an 18-inch driver in a box that is bigger than the driver. So, it's at least an 18-inch cube, which it's bigger than that.
It is enormous. You might not really comprehend what you're talking about in terms of physical size here.
22 by 20 by 24 with the grill.
Yeah.
108 pounds.
They are enormous. Now, I mean, he's got an open living space. It's not an enclosed space. He wants some absolutely killer bass. I cannot tell you in any way, shape, or form that going with power sound audio is a bad option if you want massive output capability at a very reasonable price. Because to get a similar output capability from SVS, you're going all the way up to their 16 Ultra series, and then the price difference is much in favor of power sound audio. So from a pure performance for price perspective, power sound audio wins here, but just be very aware of the physical size. That's all.
So how much do you save by buying two? So it's $18.49 for one or $35.49 for two. Okay. So you're saving like $150 or something like that. Am I doing that math right? Maybe $250.
$200. $200, right?
Yeah, for going with two. Yeah. I would call power sound. Now, first of all, I know you're not going to like this, but I would, if you just, no matter which one you decide, because we know that SVS, if you buy one and then you say, I decided to buy two, they'll give you the discount. Yeah. I don't know that power sound audio does the same thing. I would call them and ask them if they do, because, you do not have a symmetrical room. So there's not that guarantee that you're going to get more even bass with two subs. These subs are massive.
I would also say you don't really need the iPal version, because there is just...
What is the iPal version, by the way?
It's the upgraded German woofer, which technically can take more power than the standard V18 driver, but the amplifier didn't change. So what's really the difference here? The efficiency is the same. So I would maybe save a little bit of money and not get the iPal version, just get the V18 if you're going to do it. But to me, the physical size is all I'm worried about there.
V1812, is that what it is?
Yeah.
It saves you like $250 right there. Is that right? Yeah, $250 right there. So yeah, I would agree with that as well. But I would consider just getting one, putting it in there, in the places that you can do it. Maybe do the subwoofer crawl and do all that, regardless of what manufacturer you go with. Live with it for a little while, and then make a decision whether or not you think that second one is really necessary. Because remember, you're gonna have to go through Rob's a million step subwoofer setup 12. Thing, and that's not a fun. You have to tell your wife to go away for a day.
It is tedium.
It is tedious, and I would respectfully suggest earplugs. So he's on a 1 acre lot. Oh, maybe you should just go outside. So he plans to build a separated, dedicated theater in the future. He'd stick with 9-foot ceilings, but the length and width are open as far as his options go. He'd like a theater with 2 rows of 4 seats each, and he has it in mind that he wants a big 150-inch 2.35:1 screen with an anamorphic lens and a JVC projector. For that kind of setup, what would we say that would be the ideal room dimensions? I would suggest that you immediately change your plan to a 135-inch screen and just sit a little bit closer to start with. 150 suddenly puts you into the realm of consumer-level projectors have a hard time hitting all the numbers they're supposed to be hitting. 135, any projector that you can buy from any of the major manufacturers can project that image and hit all their targets that they're supposed to hit. You get to 150 and suddenly things aren't as bright, things aren't
HDR really isn't HDR at 150. That's the thing there. Unless you go up to the $30,000 laser projectors,
right. And that's where you really suffer, is that you end up having to buy this super expensive projector just because you wanted, an extra foot with a foot plus diagonal difference. Whereas you can just move your seat a little bit closer and you get that 135, and now you can buy a projector that's a couple $1,000s instead of a couple $10,000.
Right.
So I would first start with that plan. I also think that you've spent too much time on AVS Forum thinking that you need an anamorphic lens and all this other stuff. I think all of that is a waste. A lot of extra money for the very few times you're going to actually use it.
I mean, if you get a JVC where the black level's on that thing, because I'm assuming you're building this dedicated, separated place to just be a theater.
Right.
You're going to have that blacked out, I assume. I'm guessing the idea is not to have white walls and the lights on. So you get a JVC. I'm assuming that's where you're going to go. You probably don't want to match that with a screen larger than 135 if you do get a JVC. I fully agree with that. And then the black bars are going to be so good on a 16:9 screen, or you can put in some masking if you really, really want to.
See, that's what I think. I think that if you really want to do this all and be like super high tech about it, you don't spend it on making a bigger room with a bigger screen and an anamorphic lens. You go with Seymour AV's motorized masking system, and that's expensive. I usually don't recommend that to people, but with motorized masking, suddenly you get that sense that you're in a special environment, that you would have gotten in your own head by having the anamorphic lens. Well, you see, the difference is you're the only one that knows what's going on with that.
And then when you watch
lens.
The
Everybody else is
Mandalorian, you don't miss part of the image when it expands, because you've actually got a 16:9 screen ready. So yeah, if you go with our recommendation and go with the 135-inch size screen 16:9 instead, I would say that your ideal room dimensions would be 17 feet wide and 23 feet long. That's going to work really, really well with those room dimensions, with 2 rows of seats, 4 seats going across, with the 135-inch screen size, so that you're sitting approximately 12 feet away in the front row. If you're hell-bent on getting the 150-inch screen size and therefore want to sit a couple more feet away, I would expand the dimensions. I would have the room at least 25 feet long at that point, so you add the extra 2 feet. The width, it's one of those things where if the screen is bigger and you're sitting farther away, having the room wider as well just sort of feels right. So then you might expand the room to be 19 feet by 25 if you're just set on having that much bigger screen. But if you go with our recommendation, 17 by 23 would work really, really nicely.
Yeah. All right. So I already said that. Okay, Karl said, what's the best and largest 4K PC monitor these days? Best and largest. Well, what is it, Rob?
So, the one answer is you can just get a TV, because there are TVs that do PC input, full RGB, or 444, no chroma subsampling, can do 120 hertz as long as you're using an HDMI 2.1 input. You can go up to, you could get one of the Samsung 8K 98-inch ones if you want to. You got $50,000 laying around. 98-inch 8K from Samsung. There you go. That's the biggest. But
how close are you going to sit to this?
What's really popular right now is getting an LG C10 OLED, because the sizes there range from 48 inches, which is actually more expensive than the 55-incher, because to physically manufacture the 48-inchers, they're taking the spare part of the glass that's left over from the 77-inchers, and they don't make as many of those as the 55-inchers. They span from 48 inches at the low to 55 to 65 to 77, and there are even 88-inch LG OLEDs if you want to spend $30,000. But outside of that, I'm assuming maybe one of the things he's looking at is not having to use HDMI 2.1, because that means you've got to have either one of the brand new NVIDIA graphics cards or one of the brand new 6000 series ATI graphics cards. If you're looking at going with a DisplayPort input or just a graphics card that is not HDMI 2.1, then we're over to Asus Swift with their PG65 UQ. It's a 65-inch, 358 zones of full array local dimming. And yeah, that's sort of the biggest, best gaming dedicated PC monitor there that still works with DisplayPort. So Asus, the Swift PG 65-inch UQ. Interestingly, the next step down in size from there is not 55, it's 43. So there is nothing in between the 43-inch and the 65-inch in the Asus Swift PG UQ series.
Yeah, nothing but just sitting a little bit closer, which is, I can't imagine having a 65-inch PC monitor. That just seems
43 is like I can conceive of it. 65 is this is a living room setup now.
Right. I mean, you saw all the way across the room, and that would be fine if you were actually doing that. That seems like such a small use case, 43, a big desk, or do you just recline in your seat while you play seems reasonable. Yeah. I don't know. 65 just seems silly. Bertrand in Quebec City. So update, Bertrand installed his Martin Logan Motion XT 5.1 speakers in his living room. The dedicated basement theater will be constructed next year. All right. Okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but let's go. He uses his iMac as a source device in his living room. He wanted to play Netflix in 5.1 on his new Martin Logan speakers, but he couldn't get it to output 5.1 no matter what he tried. Is it simply not possible on a Mac? The only other source he has hooked up right now is his PS3, which could work for Netflix, but it's a bit of a hassle. For what it's worth, the Mac doesn't seem to have any problem playing 5.1 audio from Plex and VLC.
This is just a Mac
is he using a browser? Or is that how he's doing this?
That's what you have to do with Netflix on a Mac. They don't have a dedicated Netflix app for Mac, which by now you'd think they would, but they don't. You got to use a browser, and none of the browsers on Mac support 5.1 audio from Netflix. So this is just a weird instance where your playback device doesn't have the capability. I mean, PS3 will work, but yeah, I understand. You got to use a game controller and the hassle of booting the thing up and all that type of stuff. So I don't know, maybe you invest in one of the little under $50 streaming sticks, an Amazon Fire TV 4K or the new Google Chromecast with Google TV.
But if he's already got access to it on his other thing, whatever he was talking about,
his PS3,
PS3, I would just do it from there. I mean,
just live with it. Sure.
That's what I would.
Although
do.
PS3 is not outputting 4K and HDR.
That's true.
So a $50 Fire TV Stick 4K or a Google Chromecast with Google TV, that's where I'd point you for this. Pretty inexpensive to get all the things you want.
So he has an M Audio 5.1 LX4 speaker package from about 15 years ago. His kids recently got to them with their little fingers, and all 5 of the satellite speakers now have their dust caps pushed in. So if you guys don't know what a dust cap is, if you look at the woofer, it's that little round thing, usually darker color round thing in the center, and it's usually convex, and now they are all concave. So when you quickly tried using them in their current state, they don't sound right, and some of them make noises like a radioactivity detector. Really? Okay. He was hoping to still use at least 2 of them in the 2.1 setup. Is there any way to attempt to salvage them and test the satellites individually, since the normal connection path is 6 1/4-inch TS jacks to the back of the sub, and then 5 pairs of speakers wire from the subwoofer to each of these speakers? Oh, so it's that kind of setup. Now, pushing in dust caps, while it looks aesthetically bad, shouldn't affect the sound significantly.
It can, though.
It can,
depending
but
on
not
the materials.
Not like the radioactivity that he's talking about here. Now, there's ways of getting them back out. You can try like the double-sided tape to kind of pull them back out. There's people that have used, like, if you've got some sort of, like dust buster or something like that you can kind of not get a full seal on it, but just enough to pull a little bit of it out.
Or suck on it.
You can put your mouth on it and give it just get real up and friendly. Now, I do want to tell you that at least here in the States, I don't know what it's like in Quebec, but here in the States, you can just drop your kids off at the fire station, and they can't say no. That's part of their deal. So, and there's lots of adoption kids who won't push in dust caps that are available out there. So you might want to just look into that. I mean, first and foremost, I wonder now. This may not be salvageable, but because if it really is just the dust caps being pushed in, I would guess that more damage has been done than you would suspect, because that radioactivity sound that you're talking about, that Geiger counter, sounds to me like a torn something. something in the driver is torn, which is what it used to. I kind of had this sound when my surround was, and they're 15 years old. So first of all, come on, man, they're 15 years old. there definitely could be something wrong with them to begin with, but. Who knows what else your kids did while they're... Maybe the only thing you see is a pushed-in dust cap. Maybe what you didn't see is the pencils that they shoved into that tweeter area trying to get at that thing. The tweeter has a little plastic cover on it. So maybe they were trying to get in there, and maybe that's what it's coming from. I would also... There's at least one surround that looks like it's got some weirdness to it. So, it could be coming from that as well. So I think it might be time to just let this go and make your kids do a bunch of chores to pay back
possibly, but I just try a little bit of tape or just sucking on it with your mouth until the dust caps look.
It's hard to say that with a straight face.
I know,
man.
But that's the truth. So that is how you would attempt to salvage these, and then you can just connect one at a time right to your AV receiver. You probably want to set yourself a nice high crossover point, but they do just take speaker wire input. So, the way they're designed to work is that all the amplification is built into the subwoofer, but the amplification can come just from your AV receiver. So just as a temporary way to test each speaker one by one, you can just hook it up with regular speaker wire to your AV receiver, start with the volume low, start with a high crossover point set, and just play some sound, a sweep, I guess, if you want to test all frequencies. So, yeah, you can definitely do that. Hopefully 2 out of the 5 still work.
Yeah. Let's see here. Scott. All Scott's wife wants for Christmas is for Scott to be done putting together his basement home theater. So how about it? Can we save Christmas?
We'll try.
No, we cannot. Sorry.
Because
we're not coming there to do the work. I can help you save Christmas. That's about as good as it. Anyways, he's got his Epson 4010 projector and a 120-inch acoustically transparent screen from Elite Screens. He's got a good amount of space available behind the screen, and he has decided that he wants Klipsch speakers. He already got a Reference Premiere on walls to use as surrounds, and the setup is such that using towers for surround backs actually makes the most sense. Since he has the acoustically transparent screen and the center speaker will be behind it, should he stick with a horizontal Klipsch center, or could he get a better performance, no comb filtering perhaps, with a different choice? Well, the best would have 3 up front that are exactly the same.
Identical vertical speakers up front, which you could do, and Klipsch does sell their tower speakers individually. They don't sell them as only a pair. They will sell them as one pack. So just getting 3 identical Klipsch towers up front and one of them is hidden behind your screen. I might go for that.
Yeah, if you can't, that's the golden.
And you can have them all at the same height. It's the ideal we all dream of.
That's right. Is the Klipsch Reference Premiere series worth the price difference over the regular Reference series?
I don't know. Front 3, I'd say yes. I'd say save some money on the surround backs. Go for the Reference series, because if you're going to have towers as your surround backs, save money. Don't pay for the Reference Premiere for your surround back towers. Get the regular Reference series towers as your surround backs for sure.
I can't believe that the towers would be less expensive than just putting a shelf back there that you could buy for like $10 from Home Depot and putting a bookshelf speaker on it.
But I can't believe maybe the setup of the walls is such that whatever it is, this is.
It's a basement. He's building it himself. I can't believe that you couldn't save some money.
Regardless, stick with the regular Reference series for your surround backs. Don't spend any extra money there. But I can.
And towers aren't tall enough to get over the top of this.
Maybe he's got a riser or something. I don't know.
So now we're buying towers and a riser, a shelf and bookshelves. They get the name shelf in them.
But I will advocate that your front 3 speakers, the Reference Premieres, are worth it. I think they are a noticeably more refined sound in Klipsch's lineup. I quite like the Reference Premieres. It's a substantially different horn design that they use on those guys. So, yep, spend a little extra money on your front 3. I think it's worth it there. Save every amount that you can in your surround backs. Get some small bookshelf regular Reference series and put them on a shelf or a stick.
Stick. Hang them from a couple of like put one of those little plant hangers in the ceiling and just dangle them. Jack. Jack is wound up hiring a contractor to finish his basement. He started the project on his own, but now it's time to bring in the pro. This won't be a dedicated enclosed theater. The basement itself is isolated from upstairs with a solid core door at the top of the stairway, but the basement is open. It's got a theater area, bar area behind the theater, a gym, and a bathroom. I'm guessing the bathroom has a door. Okay, It's not completely open. Looking at around 6,500 cubic feet of air in total, the theater area is basically 14 by 14 within the 14 feet behind for the bar, so it's 28 by 14. There are soffits along both sides. I just scrolled on accident. And another soffit going across the ceiling from left to right at the 14-foot mark, which sort of visually separates the theater area from the bar area, which doesn't mean that you can't kind of encroach a little bit, maybe. He'll have a false wall up front and should end up sitting 13.5 feet from eyes to screen. So you're having a half-foot, 6-inch false wall up front?
I think he's sitting either below or slightly behind that soffit. That's what it sounds like from what he's described. Yeah.
He's playing on a 5.4.4 configuration. Should he go 120 or 135 inch for the screen and with a false wall and acoustically transparent screen? Should he go Seymour AV, or is there a cheaper alternative that's just as good? Okay, so I love Seymour AV, but at 13.5 feet, you can definitely go with the Elite Screens one because you won't be seeing the lead.
You could, but the performance is not quite as good.
I doubt he's going to notice the difference. He's got this thing's going to be open to everything. I doubt he's going to be noticing.
Yeah, you know what? You've put so much effort into this theater. I don't think it's time to skimp now. My opinion is spring for the Seymour AV. You're going acoustically transparent because this isn't roll down. This is fixed frame, so it's not outlandish. You don't have to go for the ultrafine. You can go for the regular XD.
Roll down. Did you say?
I said it's not roll down.
It's not.
So the price, okay, price there, because I mean the price delta between roll down Elite and roll down Seymour, that's bigger. But fixed frame, right. It's not so bad. I would spend a little bit extra, get the really nice Seymour, but go for the XD at this seating distance. At this seating distance, definitely go for. In Seymour's case, it'll be 137. That's their standard size. Go for the bigger one here if you're going to be 13 feet away for sure.
And remember, I mean, you can always move the screen a little bit closer because you're building a false wall, or move your seats a little bit closer,
yep.
in order to get, so that you can save a little money on the screen as well. And sometimes it's a little money and sometimes it's a lot. So just decide if it's worth it. So he's already bought a BenQ HT5550 at a great price. It's going to get mounted within the soffit that goes from left to right across the ceiling at the 14-foot mark. There is a heating register in the ceiling in front of that soffit and between the projector and the screen. Since the room is still under construction, should he have that heating register moved? He wouldn't want the projector sucking in hot air, and could the hot air blowing in the light path actually affect the image in any way? Well, the hot air won't do it unless it's like so hot it's creating like
the ripples, the infrared ripples. That would be really hot.
Air blowing in front of your projector is going to be something that's going to happen in every theater because of AC. So you do have to worry about dust and stuff, but you normally doesn't. You see the dust in the light. If you look up at the beam as it's coming out of the projector, you'll see it. But I don't ever see it on the screen. So unless it was a tremendous amount of dust that was going on, I would worry a lot more about your projector sucking in hot air. That's definitely going to put a lot of not definitely, that could theoretically put a lot of strain on the cooling system of the projector, which is a fan, which means your fan's going to be on more often and for longer periods of time. And if it's not cooling, it's going to shorten the life of your bulb. So if you can't somehow isolate this from the heating, the hot air, then I would consider moving that. I would suggest moving.
Yeah, it's a little bit
heat register.
Interesting because the way the BenQ HC5550 circulates its air, and great choice by the way in all matters because it's a very good performer at the price point you're looking for, and the throw distance is appropriate for the setup that you're going for. So very good choice there. But what it actually does is it has its air inlet is on its. Let's see, if you're looking at the back of the projector, so like you're facing the same way that the projector is, then the air intake is its left-hand side. That's where the BenQ HT550 pulls air in, is its left-hand side, left of its lens, if you're facing the same way as the lens of the projector. And then it expels air pretty much everywhere else. Out the fronts and out the right-hand side is where it expels its hot air. So having a heat register in front of your projector, it's not as though it's directly sucking that hot air in. In fact, it's kind of pushing that hot air away because it's actually expelling air out the front of the projector. But you have to have some way of having the cool air supply getting to the left-hand side of the projector, and yours is going to be embedded in your soffit. So to me, it's more about creating some kind of air baffle system where your cool air supply can make its way to the left-hand side of your projector. Because as long as cool air can get to the left-hand side of your projector inside of this soffit, then you're good to go. Because expelling the air out the front and the right-hand side, you want to have some way of getting the air out of the right-hand side inside of this soffit. But expelling the air out the front means it's actually kind of pushing away the heat that's coming from that register. So yeah, that's the way I would. I don't think having the heat register in front of the projector in this instance is the problem, because it isn't a design where it's sucking in cool air from the front.
My Epson, that it would be sucking all that hot air.
Exactly.
It's got the front vents.
Yeah.
So if you can do that, that's really good. If you can create some sort of insulated pipe that keeps, or not even insulated, but just like pathway for your,
and maybe
cool
even just some
large
diameter PC fans that keeps the air moving through that soffit.
Yeah. So surround speakers will need to be elevated basically up against the bottoms of the sidewall soffits. Since they'll be fairly high, he was leaning towards using SVS prime elevation speakers. Do we think that's a good plan? Sure.
Yes.
Works fine.
I think that will be very appropriate and work very nicely.
He hasn't settled on which front speakers he'll get, and with COVID cases spiking in Ohio, it's not just Ohio, my friend, where he lives, he isn't about to go out to stores to audition. He isn't picky about speakers, to be honest, but he likes something with a tell-it-like-it-is accurate sound, and a max budget of $3,000 for the front three. You see, that's a more reasonable budget. They'll be hidden behind his false wall and acoustically transparent screen, so looks aren't a factor. Ascend, SVS, what do we think he should get?
I mean, SVS is in Ohio.
Yeah, really.
And you're getting prime elevations as your surrounds. And I mean, just get some SVS Ultras for your front
So you're
three.
sitting 13 and a half feet away, and possibly a little bit more than that, depending on within the angles and stuff from the front left and right speakers to you. So you may be sitting 14 and a half feet away from these speakers. So we're going to be thinking about maybe amplification. Now, it depends on how loud you like to play it. And I would definitely suggest that you start off with, if you're not going to go with a horn-loaded option, which would be more efficient, and if you stuck with SVS, which would be great, I would go with the Ultra series up front.
Yep.
And you could get 3 identical bookshelves is what I would do. I don't see any reason for you to get towers.
Nope.
Though you could. I mean, everybody else seems to want to these days. But if I would definitely keep an eye the first time you sat there and watched a movie at the loudest level that you think you'll ever watch a movie at. I would a couple of times during the movie go and check my receiver and see how hot things were.
Fair enough.
If at that point you're like, man, this thing's smoking, if it's hot to the touch, and I don't mean like, ooh, it's a little warm, I mean like it's hot to the touch, then you might want to think about amplification, or you could always send SVS's back and get something else. But that would be something I think
it'll be in pretty darn good stead. So 3 SVS Ultra speakers across the front, prime elevation surrounds. I think you're in really good shape.
Yeah. So you might get a PS5 or Xbox Series X, but the BenQ projector isn't going to do 4K 120 or VRR. I always want to say VVR. So he doesn't need to worry about an HDMI 2.1 receiver, correct? Keeping the price down would be nice, but he still wants good room correction. And of course, it has to be able to do at least 5.1.4. Looking around online, there seems to be a kind of a shortage of stock. And with that AKM factory fire, that might result in a parts shortage. He's thinking he better buy it sooner rather than later. Any suggestions? Well, listen to a podcast of ours from a year ago, and whatever we said that was brand new then, or whatever receiver we suggested then, add a 100 or something to the number. And that's the one that we think you should get now.
I mean, normally I'd be pointing you at Denon's X3600H, because you do not need to worry about HDMI 2.1, so I wouldn't worry about the 3700H. Normally I'd be pointing you at the Denon X3600H, but yeah, you're right. I can't find 3600H is for sale, like anywhere. But the X4500H is still around, and it's $1,000 at accessories for less. It's, I think, $1,200 right now at Amazon if you want to get it brand new. But I mean, $1,000 for the level of receiver that you want is pretty reasonable regardless. The 3600 would dip below that sometimes, but I don't think $1,000 for that quality and level of receiver is unreasonable at all. So the X4500H is pretty much definitely where I would point you right now. Maybe grab one.
Right. So there's, you could also consider calling Best Buy and some of your local stores and saying, do you have any open box receivers for sale? And if one, because they've got curbside. I know I just went to Best Buy for a curbside pickup and the line was like insane. So me being lazy, I was like, I'll just put a mask on and go inside. And it was a madhouse in there. It was insane. It was, of course, it was over Black Friday weekend. So a lot of people were in there shopping, but, you can do curbside pickup. And I think a lot of times you don't even really have to get out of the car if you can open the back from where you're sitting. So it'd be worth, looking into that, just to see if they've got something nearby. So he asked battery backup, what should he get? Can we just tell everybody to wait until APC releases their new line of home theater stuff? Because right now, everything they've got is geared towards gaming, and they may stay with that nomenclature, which would be fine. But I would definitely like to see a few more options that are more home theater friendly, in that they are
just the aesthetic, if nothing else.
Well, just being able to lie them down on their side.
You can lie. So, ones I'm going to recommend are the BR, and then there's either the BR1000 or the BR1350 or the BR1500. All that's changing there is larger batteries that can supply more wattage from the battery as you go up in number, and then the end of it is MS. So it's like the BR1000 MS. That's almost certainly where I would point you right now. Well, it is where I would point you right now from ABC if you're buying today. So you're starting at about $150 for the BR1000. I think the value choice right now is the $175 BR1350 MS. So you can get that at B&H or Amazon for $175. I think that's the value one to get right now.
So suggestions for an equipment rack. Well, it depends on kind of what you want to do with it. There's lots of different options out there. Now, if you're like, I just need something to put my gear in, and I want it, and that's it. Once I put it in there, I'm never touching it again, so I don't have to worry about it. Well, there's lots of options out there from Sanus and a bunch of others. If you're looking for something that's a lot more accessible and has a few more features, you could look at Mid-Atlantic. Mid-Atlantic's going to be a lot more expensive, but you can get options where you basically can pull the entire rack out and turn it like 90 degrees so you can see the sides and get to the back very, very easily. Now, you would need to have gear that is able to be mounted into a rack, that sort of thing. For me, I think I've got a Santa stand that's just got glass shelves and everything's open. This would look fine inside your room. If you're looking for something that's completely enclosed, you're going to want to have something that has fans in it to help circulate air throughout. And again, if that's going to be, but if it's just going to be in a closet, I mean, you can mount it in all sorts of stupid ways, which is kind of what I did. You can almost mount it backwards so you can't really see the front that much, but so you have complete access to the back, because the front is, I've got a remote control for that, and I can control it and see everything on the screen. I don't really need access to the front. What I really need access to is the back. So you can do stuff like that depending on where you're going to mount it, or to store this gear, and I've had all sorts of different racks. Ones that were, that had fans that were completely enclosed with glass fronts and wood sides. I mean, for me, at this point in my theater, it all sits in my room with me, but kind of off to the side and tucked into the corner. So I just needed something with easy access from all sides. So I just got basically straight, glass racks with nothing on the sides or tops. So that's what I did.
For me, the value choice when you want to get an equipment rack, this is like the rack mountable style equipment rack, which is how I perceive the question. Peerless, as the company, they offer more affordable, certainly well more affordable than Middle Atlantic, and more affordable than Sanus even. So Peerless, which you can get at B&H Photo, $400 for their full height rack, which is not, crazy cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than anybody else's equipment racks, and they do like a rubberized caster system on the bottom, so you can actually like rotate it and move it fairly easily,
right.
but it's still damped because it's rubberized, not just a hard caster.
Okay. He wants some LED light strips going around the soffits. Any suggestions for those? I do not.
Philips Hue, of course, is an easy one to get behind because so many people already use Philips Hue's lighting system. So they have LED light strips that are part of the Philips Hue system. So you can mention those. But there's a cool company called Innovelli that has, they call it their Red Series Smart LED strip. And what I like there is that usually you have to cut the LED light strip to size. And that typically results in, some waste and higher prices because you got to buy a length that's longer than you need. Sometimes it's considerably longer than you need, then it feels like you're wasting a whole bunch. So the way Innovelli does it is they only sell 12-inch strips that you can just sort of Lego together in whatever length.
Daisy chain them, huh?
Yeah, in whatever length that you need. And the Innovelli ones are... Every LED is individually addressable if you want to. If you want to get that granular in your configuration and programming of it, you can make every LED its own brightness and color in the Innovelli system, and you just sort of Lego together your links 12 inches at a time. So that's one to look at because the price is reasonable.
All right. Oh, sorry. Went onto the wrong screen there. Nick has been planning his dedicated theater for quite a while now. In that time, he's had conversations with folks from AV Science, the retailer, not the forum, and Seymour AV. Well, you probably talked to Chris. Mm-hmm. And he's pretty much decided on getting a JVC NX5 or NX7 since he's used to an OLED. But when it comes to the screen, which he needs to be motorized roll-down screen, both places said that all non-acoustically transparent roll-down screens, even tab tension ones, eventually start to have waves in them since the roll-down mechanism is never 100% perfect. They both said that a woven screen material like Seymour's acoustically transparent screens is better in that regard. But Nick doesn't actually need acoustically transparent, and he will also have some space behind the screen and his OLED mounted behind it, so he doesn't want any reflections coming back through from behind the screen. Furthermore, he'll be sitting fairly close to the projector screen, about 10 feet, and he doesn't want any chance of seeing the weave. So what do we think? Is it really as bad as AV Science and Seymour AV both said, or is there a good cost-effective roll-down screen that won't get wavy and distort with the image over time? So they're probably right in that over time waves can be introduced.
Yeah.
I don't think they're wrong, but I also don't think it would be something I would worry about. I think that, so I had a tab tension screen for a long time, and I used it for a long time, and it never had this problem.
Yeah.
I don't know how many years I had it for that I used it before I put it into storage. And when I put it into storage, it just sat in my parents' home theater behind their couch. I just put it back there. It was in the air-conditioned area and everything else. Well, when I got back from Australia, I mounted it in here. I still have the mounting holes in the ceiling to prove it. And when I lowered it, it was like destroyed. And it was because of something that was wrong with the PVC coating on the back of it, that it degrades over time and it becomes sticky and reflective, and it was just hot spotting everywhere, and I ended up just throwing the screen out. But the tab tensioning was just fine. That was not a problem. And one of the things about tab tensioning is they have little screws on the bottoms that you can use to adjust this. Now, I'm not saying that you should be going around adjusting these things, but I'm pretty sure that if a wave was to be introduced, that there would be a way of tightening the screen to either minimize it or completely eliminate it. You may have to pay somebody to come in to do it, but I'm betting that it would be cheaper than just buying the more expensive acoustically transparent screen that you don't want in the first place. I would not worry about this as the too long didn't read version of this, and I would just get the tab tension screen. I mean, if you want to go Elite Screens or if you want to go Seymour AV for whatever reason, I think you would be fine on both fronts, because you are sitting, what he said, 10 feet?
Yeah,
10 feet. I might consider the Seymour, but I think at 10 feet, really, you'll be fine with... does Illusion Vision even sell these? I can't remember.
Yeah, Illusion Vision does, but it becomes more expensive to import Illusion Vision to the US than it does to just go with Seymour AV. So, I mean, this hasn't been a common thing that people have really talked about it. I'm a little bit surprised at this advice, to be honest with you.
That's why I said, like, they technically are correct.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
yeah. I mean,
it's like saying wrong, this DAC is better than that DAC. It's like, you're technically correct, but I'm never going to know the difference. So,
yeah, I just can't fully be in agreement with this. What I see are two ways to come at this, because the one option is if you get the very thick and more expensive material, it resists this for a longer amount of time. But the opposite is to go basically as inexpensive as you can, and Elite Screens because he's going to have a dedicated theater and it's all going to be dark and everything. So I mean, Elite Screens basic white is really, really good.
Right.
And the price is low enough there that in 7 to 10 years, when this starts to possibly become noticeable, like maybe you just buy another one, because the price of buying a second one in 7 to 10 years total is going to be less than getting the way more expensive one to start with.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, that's the way I look at it. I would go grab an Elite Screens. I would not worry myself about this, because you're never going to see it for at least 7 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. So he's got us in acoustic speakers all around, but he definitely wants in-ceiling speakers for Atmos. Dave F. from Ascend suggests Sonance as quite a good match for Ascend speakers, and they can actually be found for quite affordable prices, currently on sale at Best Buy or just on eBay, where they seem to be plenty of listings. However, he's also heard Rob mention Focal as a decent match, and Accessories for Less has some of their in-ceiling models to offer. Plus, there is RSL with some affordable in-ceilings too. What should he get? I mean, Ascend speakers are fairly flat, so any of the speakers that we recommend on here, and I think not Ascend, does anyways, the Varus Grand people.
Aperian.
What do they make? Aperian. They make in-ceiling speakers as well, right?
They do. As I've been saying, I'm not a huge fan of their new ones, because they got rid of the old ones that I liked. Right. The new ones are not a huge.
What do we suggest? We suggest the monoprice quite often.
Sure.
We suggest RBH. Any of those would work. All of these things, and I think everything that you've suggested would be fine. And the reality is, it's Atmos. So
honestly, though, right now, with the sale prices that Best Buy has on the Sonance in ceilings, I'd grab some of those. I'd grab them. They are what Dave recommends. They do match wonderfully well with Ascend, and the price right now is fantastic at Best Buy. So I would get the Sonance ones. I get the 6.5 inches, by the way.
So what about backer boxes? Anything not too expensive with good performance? Well, what was that one that we saw that was like a bag that they put up there?
Yeah, it's a UK thing.
Is that a UK thing? Sorry.
I haven't really taken stock of that as of late. ISO Store, their quiet box. It would not be big enough for an 8-inch in ceiling, but it is big enough for a 6.5 inch. So $60 each, but it's already a soundproofed, isolated box that you can install into your ceiling. They come with the isolation clips if you're connecting directly to the joists. So $60, ISO Store, the quiet box. That's what I would get.
So he asked us, do I, Tom, live in an area that suffers a lot of brownouts or blackouts or other power interruptions? Nick is trying to figure out why Tom has expressed that LED light bulbs for standard lamps and whatnot aren't lasting way longer than incandescent bulbs for him. Nick has noted that back in around 2016 seemed to be the sweet spot for when prices for LED bulbs got low, but rated lifespans were still 15,000 to 20,000 hours. He's noticed a lot of bulbs today are only rated for 5,000 hours and some as low as 3,000 hours. He figures that's partly to bring prices even lower, but mainly so they can sell more bulbs. But if you get the 15 to 20,000 hour rated ones, they should last way longer than incandescent. He's only ever had one fail on him in the past 5 years. So what's up at Tom's place? How should I know? I don't know. Yeah, I live in Florida, man. Power goes out around here, like a lot. And I do not have a whole home surge, protection system, though I probably should. I don't have anything like that in my house, but what I do have is like a ton of lights. Like just lights everywhere, and it's ridiculous. I think in my in Florida, what they do is they build a house that's got like a kitchen, 1 bathroom, and 2 or 3 bedrooms, right? And then they'll screen in the porch, and then they'll finish the porch, and they'll add a bedroom to that, and they'll expand the kitchen into the garage, and then build another garage over there. Build into my house has been built out a bunch of times. So just in the area that was the porch, I think I have like 8 can lights in there. So they burn out, and I don't pay attention to which ones, how long they last or any of that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with me. I guess.
Yeah, LEDs should last longer. I mean, the last light bulbs I bought were in 2009. I haven't bought a light bulb since then. So.
Well, you heard it here. You guys know when my kitchen was done, which was it was like a month ago. So we'll say I probably installed lights like a month ago, like beginning of November, maybe the end of October. So let's just say the beginning of November 2020. So November 1st, 2020 is when I installed LED lights all throughout my kitchen. Well, I'll let you know when the first one goes. Okay, and then we'll go from there. We'll see if it's 20,000 hours or not. Dane's a new listener, and he says he wishes he had found us sooner. He has quickly listened to all the episodes in our RSS feed, which should be 20, I think. Yeah, that's how that works. His theater isn't fully complete, but he'd like our thoughts on a few things. You should start from scratch, Dan. I'm sorry to tell you that. And then we'll go over. Tear down the walls. Okay. It's not a dedicated theater. Not a dedicated enclosed space. It's his basement, and his theater area is open to other areas, but at least a door closes off the upstairs. In total, he has about 4,500 cubic feet of air. Everything except his front wall and his acoustic panels is white, including a 7.5 foot drop tile ceiling. He's using a ViewSonic 747 projector at the moment with a 105-inch silver ticket screen sitting about 13 feet away. The plan is to paint the front and both side walls dark gray, but what should he do about the ceiling? He doesn't really want the whole basement to be black tiles, and he doesn't plan to replace the white T-bars. So she just have a few rows of black tiles at the front of his screens, front of his room closest to the screen. Maybe just paint the first few rows in the same dark gray. What do we think? Okay, so it is insanely white down here, which is fine because that's exactly what my kitchen now looks like. It's like stupid white. So he's got some room. It's got a wooden floor. He's got a rug in front of him, and he's got some acoustic panels. It's hard to tell. So one on the back wall for sure, going between his surround back speakers, maybe surround speakers. Those look like surround backs.
They are. Yeah.
Then he's got some up front and kind of on walls, kind of where he can place them, which is good. He looks like he's sitting in an L. Is that correct? Or he's facing into the L. It's very hard to tell. So he's facing into the L, like he's sitting in the middle of the L, where the corner is. But there's also stuff behind him. So it's not a true L.
No,
it's more like a T,
oddly shaped, open up basement. Yeah.
So he's got a rug in front of him. He's got some room treatments, and he's thinking. Now, I'm gonna be the first to tell you here that I am a big proponent of not killing yourself just because somebody told you should paint something gray. I think that by painting the walls gray here, just in that area to the basically from. I would paint your right wall, just for aesthetic reasons. I would paint it all the way from behind you, from right at that corner, all the way forward, the front wall, and the left wall to basically where it juts out to the left further. The juts out to the left. I would paint all that gray. Mm-hmm. I would not worry about the walls directly to your left. That's going to be white. I'm not going to worry about that. I wouldn't worry about the ceiling. I don't think it's going to be worth.
I can kind of get behind that.
Worth the trouble of trying to go up there, and then God forbid you sell the house someday, and somebody's like, "How come this little section here has gray T-bars up there?" And I just don't think it's going to be worth it. I would not worry about the ceiling. I would just do it for aesthetic purposes. I would just paint the walls until it makes sense to stop. You certainly don't want to have some weird line in the middle of a wall. So that's what I would do.
I'm in agreement with that. I would say with the ceiling, so I definitely wouldn't replace the entire basement ceiling with black tiles. No way.
No.
I would not paint ceiling tiles. But so basically, do what Tom says first. If you're somehow noticing reflections from the ceiling directly above the screen at the front, if that becomes an issue, which you can test before you change anything, I would consider some fabric just at the front of the room close to the screen, because you can just like pin it up there, honestly.
Right.
I could consider some fabric against the front portion of your ceiling. That would be the most I would do.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was going to be my suggestion too, because you can cover everything up there and take it down and it's all normal.
Exactly.
So he's planning on a receiver upgrade since his current Pioneer can't do Atmos or 4K. Could something like the Denon 3600H be configured to use 6 Atmos speakers instead of surround backs? Nope.
No, sir. No, there is no way to take a. So I mean, we've got receivers that can do 7.1.4, but you can't tell them to do 5.1.6 instead. They just don't have that. The only way to have 6 overheads from one AV receiver is to get one of the models that can do 7.1.6, like the X8500H, or the 15 speaker 9.1.6 options.
So we've said it before that 2020, and I guess we're going to extend this into 2021, is a terrible time to buy a receiver, and it's because of the HDMI 2.1. But then we've got the AKM fire to worry about, and that means that we're not sure exactly going forward the availability of the chips that they're going to need to build receivers. And we know the DACs and ADCs and stuff like that are going to be maybe in short supply. We're not really sure. They're working on it right now.
Yeah.
If I were in your case, I would get, first of all, we just said that the 3600 right now is almost impossible to find.
I had trouble finding it, yeah.
So, I would get something that can do the speakers, the 5.1.4 or, 7.1.4.
He's only got one row of seats. I don't really know why he's super worried about 6 overheads.
Right, me neither. But I would do, if you want to wire for all of them,
sure,
fine, wire for all of them.
Well, yeah, drop tile ceiling, you don't even have to do it ahead of time. Drop tile ceiling, you can do it after the fact easily.
Right. But I would just do that, and I would get the one that does everything that I want to do, and that'll give you the, because of how things work these days, that'll give you the good version of whatever room correction you go with. So it's either going to be Odyssey with Denon and Marantz or YPOW with Yamaha, and don't buy anything other than those two. So and that will get you the good room correction, and Bob's your uncle. Then you can sit this out for the next couple of years, waiting for receivers to come down in price enough, and these features to come down from the flagships to these more mid-range price, and then accessories for less to finally get them. So that's what I would suggest.
I'm in agreement. Yep.
All right.
X4500H is probably the one. There you go.
There you go. So he's got a 7.1 speaker configuration right now with monoprice monolith THX in-wall front, left, and right. The monolith THX center below its screen. ELAC in-wall surrounds and Polk RTI in-wall surround backs. He also has one SVS PB3000 that is directly to the right of his couch. He went mad using Room EQ Wizard, and it would have been helpful to have found us sooner. He achieves fairly linear bass across his seats, but the leftmost seat measures noticeably different than the other two. But his question is about those surround back speakers. They're at ear height 4 feet behind his seats, and due to the placement on his walls, they're kind of close together and shifted over to the left. Should he just nix them, move them, or have in-ceiling surround backs instead? Well, you know what I'm going to say. The first thing I would do is try your system, just rerun Odyssey and tell it you don't have surround backs.
Okay.
Or whatever system you're using. I think it's Odyssey. I would just redo it and then see what 5.1 point whatever it is that you've got sounds like. And then ask yourself, do I need to have surround backs, or does the surround backs actually make a difference? So these are, I have to scroll up to see the pictures. These are they on walls or in walls? They're in walls. Okay. Yeah. So there's no reconfiguring where they are.
Not easily.
You're sitting far enough back there. I mean, it's 4 feet, and basically, for those of you that aren't looking at the images, the surround back left fires into the leftmost seat of the couch, and the surround back right fires into the center seat of the couch.
Pretty much, yeah.
So they are. If you're on the right of the couch, which is where the lounge, the bigger seat is, where you can stretch out very easily. Neither of the surround back speakers are behind you.
Yeah. I actually kind of think what you have is fine. Like I don't see it as a problem.
I mean, it's funny that he's got THX certified speakers all around, because this is closer to a THX certified,
right,
or THX suggested surround
where the surround backs are closer to each other. Yes.
They're going to be operating more as in mono than they are in basically stereo, because they're firing so close to each other. I wouldn't worry about this, because honestly, I don't think you can worry about this.
I mean, definitely wouldn't change them to in ceiling. Definitely not.
No.
You only have the one row of seats, so elevating them isn't really necessary. It's mostly just that they're slightly off center, but you know what? Your distances and trim levels are going to compensate for that. It's not like we're super picky about positional audio behind us. So right. I think you're fine.
I would suggest, if it really bothers you that they're off center, I would look in your manual and figure out how to run a 6.1 point whatever, and just use the one directly behind your main seats.
I'd leave it at 7. It's no big.
Try that, see how it sounds, and if you say this sounds exactly the same or somehow worse, because those are going to be the options. It's either going to sound worse or exactly the same as what you had before. I don't think that's going to be better. I think it's going to sound worse or exactly the same. So that if you really cared, that you could do that. So his main source right now is a Roku stick, and it will likely stay that way since Roku can run the Apple TV app now too. He's got a Samsung Blu-ray player. Should he get an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and should it be Samsung? Well, the reason to get the Ultra, since you don't have a 4K projector, at least not yet, the reason to get it was for the Atmos sound.
Yeah.
That's the main reason to get it. Should you? I mean, not yet. You don't have any Atmos speakers, so why? But
he's leaning that way, though. That's where things are headed.
When you go in that direction, then yes, I would get one. But I would just realize that you may decreased picture quality because of the HDR to SDR conversion. You may find that some of the images don't look quite as good as you expect them to, because they're having to convert down from HDR to SDR, but you'll get the better sound.
Yeah. Because of that, and because we're definitely not worried about Dolby Vision with a projector, I would suggest, if I think it could be worth it, because you're probably going to want it anyway. But I would get a Sony. I'd get the X800 Mark II. Yeah, that's what I get.
Mark II. Oh, you went to the Mark II thing, right?
It is a Mark II, yes. But the Sony X800 Mark II, because it's $250, so it's pretty reasonable in price. It's not crazy expensive. And that does give you some ability to manually adjust the way the HDR to SDR conversion looks. If you want to, at least you have the ability with that one, and you're not paying a ton extra for it. And yeah, there you go. It can even do Dolby Vision, but it's Sony's insane thing where either everything is Dolby Vision or nothing is, and you have to manually choose. Very weird. But yeah, that's the one I'd get.
All right. Dalton. First up, Dalton asked us a couple of weeks ago about the best way to spend his budget. He thought we'd say get a second sub, because that's what we always say. But we actually thought he'd get the most bang for his buck by getting a bigger TV. He had just bought a 65-inch, or I guess he has just bought a 65-inch OLED. He exchanged it for a 77-inch, and he's very happy with it. So there you go. He also asked where to get Dolby Atmos demo clips, and we pointed him to the digital theater. He was able to download the clips just fine and put them on a USB stick. His Panasonic UB820 Ultra HD Blu-ray player would play them, but not with the Atmos or DTS-X audio. The Atmos clips didn't have any sound at all, and the DTS-X clips seemed kind of muted and didn't sound right. He figures it's just a media player app in his Panasonic, so is there a media player that will let him plug in USB thumb drives or external hard drives and directly play back video clips with all the video and audio quality intact? I don't have a clue.
So, I mean, NVIDIA Shield Pro is definitely the one that'll do this without any issues, because they actually just have VLC player. If you don't want to mess about with Plex or anything like that, they just have VLC player, which will play anything with the proper outputs coming out of the NVIDIA Shield Pro. So that's where I would point you, because that's the one that has USB inputs and just the easiest apps to work with. That would be my. I think you'll really like having an NVIDIA Shield Pro too. To be honest, I think you might find yourself really cottoning to that device.
All right, looks like this next question isn't too long, so we'll do this last one and then we'll go on. Mitch is back now with photos and Gik's advice, so he wants to know what we think of the plan they came up with. He provided Gik with the same photos, a description of his room, and asked what could be done with a budget of $500. What is this? Oh, those those are records, I think. Anyways, he's got, it looks like a TV on a stand with, I'm going to say def text. Are they on the other
those
side?
look like B&W with their separated tweeters on
B&W with the tweeter on top. That's right. Then on the left and right, and maybe even more, there are, there's like desks, work desks with computers
PC
on them.
setups on both sides, to the left and to the right.
He's got towers on the, okay, so towers. He's got a turntable just below his TV. He's got the 2 doors in the back of his room. One's inside of an alcove. And
there's stairs going up to the, I mean, it's up to your left, to the rear left.
I can barely see it.
Stairs going up there, Yeah,
in the back left corner, there's stairs going up. There's soffits coming in the room, kind of halfway in the room from one side. It's a strange little space here. He's also got a full printer. I mean, like a full-size copy scanner printer machine in here. Yeah, to the left. And a 2-seater couch. And that's all the only seating area.
Love seats.
And I don't see anything other than stereo speakers. I don't think he's going to
That's right. Else. Yeah.
So Gick said that the general advice is to focus on corners and first reflection points first, then the back wall and ceiling, then the front wall last. With his oddly shaped room, placement of doors, relatively small size, it's about 14.5 wide by 10.5 long and 7.5 high, and quite a bit of equipment already packed in, straddling corners and treating those side walls isn't really in the cards, but some treatments anywhere is better than no treatments. And all the panels are recommended, including the diffusion layer for their flex range technology, partly for looks and partly so that each panel would affect as wide a range of frequencies as possible. They suggested monster bass traps mounted flat on the walls instead of straddling, as close to the 3 available corners as possible. They suggested 4-inch thick bass traps with diffusion plates on top on the front and back walls and possibly on the side wall, and then 2-inch spot panels on the ceiling since he has a slightly lowered ceiling height. Their full suggestion would double his proposed $500 budget. So if he had to pare it down, they said to keep the 3 monster bass traps and just 2 of the 4-inch panels and put them on the front wall since that's where he has the most available space. What do we think? These pictures are very, I think he's got a lens or something on here. It looks like things are slightly rounded, so I'm having a bit of a hard time judging how much size and space is actually available here. But I am never much of a fan of going straight for your ceiling. I understand what they're saying, and that is that if you can hit that reflection point in your ceiling, that will take one of the main bounces, because a lot of the bouncing at first reflection points is actually going to be bouncing off a monitor that's on the side there. And there's no way you can put a panel on a monitor and still use the monitor that I am aware of. There's
they were like
panels.
Your typical sidewall first reflection points in this particular setup. Not really an option. I fully agree. Their general advice of the order to attack things, I'm mostly in agreement, except that I place more importance on the back wall than they apparently do. That is the only place where there's a slight bit of disagreement. Can you move that
bulletin board that's behind you and just put a big old panel back there? Because that's the first thing I would do, is move that bulletin board to someplace else and then put a panel right there. I would straddle the corner behind the air filter or do something on that wall back there. I would do a panel on the front wall and maybe on the right. That looks like on the right of the main right speaker. Right in that little corner right there, I would do something. And I would put panels above the monitors, basically, going horizontal.
Except there's like a window on one of them.
There is?
Yeah.
I haven't
there's
found
curtains
that.
over it.
I see it now. I see it. So you can't do it on that wall, but on the other one you could. On the left wall you could.
That was Gick's suggestion, too, with their, like $1,000 price point one. They're like, put a panel on the side wall, because why not? Anything is going to help. Anything's better than nothing. Honestly, I would follow Gick's advice with the one exception of I would make sure to have a panel on that back wall behind the half of your seat that has a back wall behind it. Like, to me, that is very important. Gick did not stress that, like, at all. Basically, I would stress that a lot. I would definitely have a panel on that physical back wall that's behind half of your love seat. But other than that, I say follow their advice. I probably wouldn't place quite as much importance as they do on having the 2-in-1 panels that are both absorption and diffusion. They're not wrong. what they're saying is true. It's just that it does increase the price, and you're working with a somewhat limited budget. So I would, if it's the difference between getting a panel and not getting a panel because it just becomes too expensive to have the diffusion layer on it, I would nix the diffusion layer before I would nix the panel entirely. Let's put it that way, right? So I would, back wall is more important to me, and absorption in favor. I would get absorption panels for sure. Diffusion is a nicety.
Right. I agree completely. I would go straight absorption, cheapest panels they've got.
Yeah.
Don't, and so that you can get as many as possible. And if you bought a bunch of 2x2s or, whatever, and just place them all the places that you could, I would care, yes, it would be great if you had some corner trapping. I think that's probably important here. But just getting as many panels up as possible in all the different places and having them smaller so they're easier to hang and easier to it would probably be better than having larger panels that you're now, I can kind of get it here, but then I have to move my monitor and everything else. I would rather have you be able to place it easier than get the bigger panels. And
like
a little bit cheaper.
A little bit of it was that getting like a 2 foot by 4 foot by 4 inch thick panel is a little bit cheaper than getting 2 foot by 2 foot by 4 inch thick panels. So that was part of where Geek's advice was coming from. But I definitely agree with what Tom just said, that if it's easier to position some panels by having them be physically a bit smaller, and maybe we keep the price more reasonable by nixing the diffusion layer and just going absorption only, that's what I would opt for.
You could save a lot of money just by doing it yourself too. In this case, in a situation where you have, very limited, like I've got a wall that's kind of like one of your walls that's just like kind of narrow and off to the side, and I got nothing. So I built my own panel to go on that, and I basically just cut the installation so it was the right size, and then I just put wood next to it, and then screwed it together, and then that was it. And it just the frame holds the panel, the insulation in via friction, just by the shape of the frame. So it's not that hard to do. Staple gun and some fabric, and Bob's your uncle. All right, who have we got left, Rob?
We have Greg, Timothy, Nathan, Brendan. Scrolling past Brendan's pictures, which look nice. Joe, Aaron, Alex, and Colin. That is everybody on the list as of right now. And then, questions that whatever came in on Monday and Tuesday.
All right. I feel like I've got to the questions fairly fast, but we didn't get through as many as I
Well, some of them were really long, like multi parts. So that's what happened.
Yeah. All right. So everybody blame each other. Not my fault. We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Dane and Jack for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and sending us a PayPal donation, as well as our 126 patrons over at patreon.com, including Jack once again. So thank you, Dane, Jack, and 125 patrons.
Yeah, Dane and Jack, thank you for the PayPal donations. Really do appreciate that. And patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anybody who would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Thanks very much to our 126 patrons over there. Jack, thank you for being one of them.
We want to thank Gurinder for sending Amazon cards to myself and Lee, as well as the notes of gratitude from Jason, David, Bertrand, Dane, John, Rob, not this one, different one, Andrew, Greg, Karl, Nathan, Brendan, Joe, and Colin.
That's going to be a lot of names. Gurinder, first of all, thank you for sending those gift cards and finding other people supporting us out there in the world and prompting Tom to keep getting that Nespresso machine. Gurinder's really hung up on that. Jason, David,
we'll see.
Bertrand, Dane, John, Rob, Andrew, Greg, Karl, Nathan, Brendan, Joe, and Colin. Woo! Awesome to get all of that support. Wonderful to read that. Really do appreciate it. The notes of gratitude and encouragement. Thank you to everybody who continues to listen and write in to us. It's wonderful to keep this podcast going. Thank you so much, everyone.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.